Hi, everyone. This is Tony Nash with Complete Intelligence. Thanks for joining us for another quick hit. These are 5 to 7 minute discussions with industry experts to really help us look at contemporary issues and understand how they affect markets and companies and supply chains. Today, we're talking with Chad Moutray of the National Association of Manufacturers. Chad is the chief economist for the NAM, and he talks with manufacturers across the US every day, understanding their issues and trying to help them understand the overall landscape. So I've been looking forward to this discussion. Chad is one of probably 4 or 5 economists who I actually listen to. And so I'm really, really happy to have him today. So Chad, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So the National Association of Manufacturers, actually this year is our 125th anniversary. So we would have been celebrating that this year if we weren't having the COVID-19 crisis. Kind of something called Creators Wanted was a big campaign we had pitched off this year. Obviously, that's been distracted into the COVID world. But we have 14,000 members, about 250 or so vertical associations are members of ours, as well as every state manufacturing association. So we have a pretty broad swath of listening to manufacturers, what they're thinking about. My job as chief economist is to take all that information and really be able to be a good sound talking head, I guess, on what's happening in the economy. So,
great, perfect. So Chad, I guess one of my big questions that I've had over the past couple of months as COVID has kind of run its way through the economy is, you know, there's been almost this kind of fog of war sense with everybody, not just with companies, but people sitting at home, government, everything. Can you walk us through a little bit of what some of the manufacturing firms that you've been interacting with, like, you know, how do they come to understand the environment? What have they been thinking about? What have their priorities been? Because that's, you know, I think it's been confusing for everybody, but from a manufacturing perspective, what have you been seeing?
So I guess I'll go through a couple things here. Number one, just that dearth of data that we had early on. Everyone was asking me, what is the current capacity utilization for manufacturing right now in the state of Pennsylvania? I'm like, I don't know. How would I know, right? And so I think that there was just a lack of information there early on that I think, and also I think the abruptness and just the severity of this downturn, I think it just caught a lot of people by just like shock. The numbers are so heartbreaking and jaw-dropping that I think that's part of it. We're starting to get a sense now of what those numbers really are, and just the drastic-ness of these figures in terms of being the worst ever or the worst since the Great Recession. But there was a lot of lack of information early on that I think really just caught people by surprise. I think the other part of it is companies don't know what to do, right? I mean, this is not just a business conversation, it's also a life and death conversation. Do you keep operating? Do you not keep operating? Are you operating in a state where you're forced to close, or are you deemed essential? I mean, a lot of those things early on, I think, really dominated manufacturers' time in terms of whether to operate. What happens if someone gets sick in your facility? What do you do? Do you close everything down? So I think that there was a scramble early on just to figure out operationally, what am I doing, right? I think now then it kind of moved from there to the conversation about PPE, right? Protective equipment, whether that's masks or ventilators or whatever else. And one thing that really has dominated that manufacturing conversation really over the last month has been the National Association of Manufacturers working very closely with the administration, whether that's FEMA or DOD or the Vice President's office, to say, okay, what do we need, right? In order for everything to come back to normal, how many masks do we need? How many ventilators do we need? All this kind of other stuff. And then helping to identify manufacturers that can produce that. And so I think that really has dominated a lot of time, not so much for me, but for the NAM over the last month or so. And I think just kind of getting a handle on what are those needs. I think that has now all really gravitated into what I'll call what is the new normal, right? Everyone really is talking about what does manufacturing look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. How do you get back to a sense of normal, whether there's a vaccine or not a vaccine? And I think that really is going to dominate much of my time from a research perspective, I think, over the coming months of, you know, I mean, we ask on a survey that we have coming out this next week, we ask, are you re-engineering your process to have social distancing in mind, right? Are you going to let people work from home, right? That's not always possible on the shop floor, but in some
Right.
cases it might be, right? So those types of questions, I think, are first and foremost. We're talking to a series of tire manufacturers, right? They have a huge retail operation, and retail is just going to change dramatically, right? So they not
Right.
only have to look at the manufacturing side, but just how retail is going to change, and then how they can react to that. So anyway, that's a lot,
Sure.
but it just kind of shows you just how dynamic this particular moment in time is in terms of dramatically changing the sector.
Right. A lot of big questions. And so just kind of what's your, I know you're still in the process of doing research, but what's your feeling now? Do you get the sense that people want to get back to kind of a normal-ish environment quickly? Like, do you think we'll get there? Not, I know there is relative, but do you think there's a desire to get back and get kind of relatively normal business activity back, say, in Q2 or Q3? Do you get the sense it's just going to be longer? I guess the question that I really have is, what's the drag? Like, how long will this drag effect impact companies and impact manufacturers?
And I do think that we've passed the worst of it, right? I do think that in that late March, early April, that's when the things just really hit bottom, and you've started to see a sense, especially from some of the more recent data, that things, while they're still bad, right, are not as bad as they were a few weeks ago. And so I do get a sense that you're starting to already see that bounce back in the marketplace, which is good. I think in general, there is what we'll call quarantine fatigue, right? Not just for consumers, but for businesses as well. And so I do think that there is a sense that activity is going to start resuming. The difference here is that, yes, people are going to come back to it, but there's still going to be some hesitance there, right? There's still, we don't have a vaccine. Right. And so coming back to work is not the same as it was before, right? I mean, that's true at the NAM. It's true of every workplace in the country. People's willingness to go out to restaurants and bars and go to Disney World and all that kind of stuff has all changed a little bit, right? So I do think that we are bouncing back already, but it's kind of in this new environment where we still have a little bit of hesitance about getting in crowds, or we still have some hesitance there about how does my workplace change, right? Yes, I can go back to the office maybe, but am I going to? Am I going to continue working from home? Or how much separation is there between me and my coworker on the shop floor? So yes, I do think we've already started to see that rebound, but I do think that it's in a different place than it was, say, 2 months ago even.
A lot of open questions. Let me shift gears a little bit and ask you about trade. With COVID and initially when this was really hitting China hard, we saw a lot of supply chains really stall out and slow down. We've been talking about kind of the regionalization of supply chains for a few years at Complete Intelligence. Is that something that you're seeing? And I know you're not necessarily advocating a position, so I don't expect you to be doing that, but are you seeing that happen, or is that just kind of a concept that's out there that we're not seeing a lot of traction on yet?
I mean, I think we were already starting to see people reevaluating their supply chains as a result of the trade war, right? Last year, we were seeing a lot of that. Doesn't mean all of it's coming back to the U.S., but it certainly means production might be moving out of China and to other places. I think this exacerbates that even more. I think just there's been this realization that we can't depend on one country and one source to get all of our stuff anymore, given just the extremeness of this disaster economically. And so I do think people are going to be reevaluating the supply chain. I mean, from an NAM point of view, we want as much of that to come back to the U.S. as possible. So we'll be advocating policies on onshoring, look for that coming from us. But I mean, the reality is companies are going to locate where they locate, right? There's a lot of reasons why companies locate wherever they do. And that's where their customers are, that's where their other suppliers are, that's where the intelligence is, right? And some of it's going to go to Mexico or to the rest of Southeast Asia. But there is definitely, I think, this understanding that we've got to wholesale reevaluate that supply chain process in terms of who we're buying from, making sure there's duplication. And I think that's a conversation that every firm is having right now.
Very good. Chad, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to have you back in a few months to revisit some of these questions. I think as as the unknowns dissipate, it'll be very interesting to look back and see kind of what people did right, what mistakes people can avoid, next time this happens, because, I think this will happen again, and, how we can adjust. So I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate all the great work that you do. And as you know, I watch you regularly on social media and whenever you do speaking engagements. So thanks very much.
And thanks for what you do as well, Tony. We all listen to you as well.
Thank you.